Welcome to episode 10 of BS with Bob Schmidt. I'm your host, Bob Schmidt. My guest this time around for episode 10 is a good friend of mine, Kenny Ahern. He is a performer, and he used to be with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. He is a father, a husband, all-around great guy. Our kids used to go to Scouts together. We went to the same church. We've had beers together. He was on my radio program many times. Just an all-around great guy, Mr. Kenny Ahern.
Right back at you, Bob.
Thanks. So, I think the last time I had you on my radio program, it was right when that clown scare was going on around the country, and everybody was like, oh, I hate clowns. And I thought, okay, who do I know that does this? Oh, Kenny does. But you're not really, you're an entertainer, and you went to clown school, and you run clown school. But are you considered a clown?
The essence of what I do and is clowning, and to me, clowning is not a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
For how I go out and I perform and how I look, I don't wear a red nose. I don't have all the makeup. I don't have floppy shoes. At a time I did do that, but kind of just what I did evolved. And so now a lot of times, the people that book me will explain what I do. And then the person that's interested in hiring me will say, oh, so he is a family entertainer, or some might say he is a clown, or some might, whatever they do it, because it kind of, it kind of defies this description. But I definitely don't fit the pop culture definition of what clowning is today. And, that's kind of sad, but what can you do? You move on and, do the best that you can do. And I'm all about making people happy. And that's the bottom line.
And you do. I've seen your show live many times. I was actually up in Duluth, Minnesota, and I told you the story before. But when my kids were little, we were up visiting family, and TV was on, and we were flipping through the channels, and there was a public access show, and I'm like, there's my buddy Kenny Ahern on TV in Duluth. and so, it was cool to be able to, to see you do your performance in, at a library or whatever it was at the time. So, my question to you, I guess, is, I know that like McDonald's has moved away now from Ronald McDonald because, the whole clown scare. What is why are people afraid of clowns?
Well, in all honesty, I don't buy into the fact that a majority of people are. And I think that, there's a lot of reasons that have caused that, but you take a very innocent art form and give it a, macabre theme. And that right there causes, it's like what comedy is. With comedy, there has to be, the straight portion of what's going on and the comedy part. And that conflict is what creates the laughter. Well, it's the same thing. If you have something that's very innocent and you make it not so innocent, then as far as entertainment, it makes it interesting. And I think that's kind of, more the way that it's gone. But in all honesty, I truly believe that, people that will see someone that's passionate and very focused on what it is that they're doing and out there trying to bring joy and happiness to the audience, it doesn't matter what you call a person. That whole idea is you're creating an experience, a moment that everyone can have a really good time.
And people will find fault with whatever,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I did the radio business for 30 years, and, you could do everything exactly right, and you say running instead of running one time, and somebody, says, well, he drops his ing, and it doesn't matter what it is. There's always somebody going to complain about something.
The thing that I always like to say is accepting that you can't please anyone, please everyone.
Right.
It's not failure.
Yeah.
Well,
I had one person tell me a long time ago is when I first started off in the radio business, it was like, oh, you're great, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody told me, they said, you know what? You're not as good as your favorite, as the person that says that you're the best, and you're not as bad as the person that says that you're the worst, and you're right in the between. And once I realized that and figured that out in my life has been a whole lot easier,
Well, for me, it's about how I am in that moment, in that particular show that's going on. Because
Uh-huh.
I'll finish a show and I'll just feel like, oh man, I could have done so much better. The person that I chose up on stage, didn't have a good time, and then the show will be done, and that person that I thought that didn't have a good time will come up and tell me, that was awesome. I had a great time. Thank you for bringing me up on stage. But I think that it's okay for you to be strong about how you feel and wanting to do the best that you can. Um, but but I think that when you take your work and you take it to the highest level it possibly can be, you know sometimes even when I think that I'm at my worst, I'm still okay for the audience. That doesn't negate me from trying to do my best every single time that I perform. But I take it very passionately that I want people to leave my show happier than when they came in to see it. And
Right.
that's what I strive for in every show. There's going to be some people. I mean, comedy's subjective. Some people aren't going to dig what I do, and I get that, but you might want to get up and leave then and not hang out from my show.
You,
It's like
you,
you have that choice.
yeah. Do you ever have people that like bust your chops when you're up there? I mean, like yelling stuff out or things like that.
Very, very, knock on wood. I have a lot of friends that do get hecklers.
Yeah.
But I think, Bob, for me, is that when I perform, for the most point, I don't talk. I don't say that I'm a silent performer. I don't have a need to talk because I communicate with my gestures, with my movement. And I think that the fact that I do that, people really have to pay attention to what I'm doing. Like for instance, if you're going and you have a stand up and a stand up's going and doing their set, you don't have to look at them. It's better that you do, but you don't have to look at them to get the comedy. You can be talking to someone and still be listening to what that person's saying. But with my show, if you don't watch what's going on, there's nothing worse to being in an audience and all of a sudden hear this huge laugh from everybody in the audience. And if you weren't paying attention, you're thinking, what did I miss? So people really focus on, what I'm doing and how I communicate and that relationship when I bring people up on stage with me.
I don't think I've seen your show. I would say at least 15 times, probably more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never ever heard you talk when you're Kenny.
Yeah, I do. On occasion that I do, but it'll be, it'll be for shock value, and it usually gets a big laugh. I have a piece that I do in my show where I'm balancing on top of a rolling globe and I'm playing the soprano saxophone at the same time. And at the end, I've been silent my entire show. And then at the end, after I do that, and if the audience is not, just like, they don't realize how difficult it is, I'll kind of just break and look at them and I'll just go, that was really hard. And it gets a good laugh from the audience, and the fact that I've been silent the whole time, it's just kind of, it's that yin and yang,
Yeah.
like I was talking about before. So, and I do stage whisper, to the people that come up on stage, particularly with safety. If someone's being really squirrely or if someone's, maybe getting too close to the edge of the stage, I'll do it where I'll turn like 3/4 to the audience and I'll whisper to them, hey, just relax, or, look at me, let's have fun, and there's sometimes that, particularly, and it's not just with kids, but with adults, is they'll come up on stage and I can sense, when they were out in the audience and they had their hand, waved up and, pick me, pick me. And then they get up on stage and they look out and see all these eyes staring at them. And all of a sudden they realize they don't want to be up there. So I have to be very intuitive about that. There are some entertainers that thrive on that. And then at that point, they're going to just embarrass that person while they're up on stage. I have no problem looking at the person going, hey, you okay? You want to go back to your seat? And if they say yes, I get the audience, give them applause, make them feel really good and have them go back. And then I just bring someone else up on stage.
Yeah. Have you found that cell phones have been a big detractor as an entertainer?
that's one of my, for me personally, a big challenge is that when I perform is to see how few cell phones I can get people to be viewing while they're watching the show. And again, honestly, it all comes down to the fact that with me not talking, people really have to pay attention. So as far as people sitting down and looking at their cell phones during the show, I mean, people are going to miss something. They're going to miss a moment, and we as humans don't like to miss out on things.
No,
And so I
it's
think
a
that
FOMO effect.
yeah, I think that that's worked in my favor. Most people, including myself, at the beginning, before there was even cell phones, you would always say, please don't videotape. The only thing that I have right now, particularly if I'm inside, is I just they at the beginning of my show is just ask that there's no flash photography, because if I'm up on top of a ladder, standing on one foot and doing juggling clubs, and a flash comes in front of my eyes, that could be kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
But the whole idea that if they want to take pictures during my show, it's like it's to the point now that it's that at the end that you just say, hey, if you took some pictures of the show, make sure you tag Kenny Ahern Comedy. When you post it on Instagram or on social or something, just tag that, so it's you kind of use it to where it kind of helps you to promote your brand.
How often does that happen? Because I know that as my character Santa, because I play Santa, right. I've asked people to do to tag Santa Bob Santa, because that's what I go by on Facebook. And I've not had anybody, with all of the pictures that have been taken, I've never had anybody tag me. I've seen pictures, and somebody has actually tagged me in somebody else's pictures, like, oh, my cousin saw you as Santa and tagged me in it or something.
Right.
But other than that, I've never had the people that have taken the pictures themselves actually do that.
It goes in spurts. A lot of times if I'm, out of town and I'm working a gig and one person tags me, the tag will pop around and it'll go to someone else that, that saw it. And then they'll go, well, I have to put up and I have to tag Kenny. And that's what I find. It kind of, builds it. It's not something that happens, all the time. I have friends that do shows and, that's part of their shtick. That they, the entire show, tag me here, holding up, where to tag them, and they build that. And those people, I mean, they get amazing photos and, and get tagged a lot. But for me, I'll do it, at the end, I might bring it up. And then I also have, QR codes. I have my, my social, Kenny Ahern Comedy. I have that up so people can see that, if they choose to do it. It's not something that I push really hard, but I know the people that do, they're very successful at it. People, one of the things, for me, I'm a solo entertainer, but I'm really a duo entertainer because I bring partners up on stage, and I do stuff by myself as well. Merch is something that is, people are very successful selling merch at the end of their shows. And everyone, how come you don't sell merch? How come you don't sell merch? And it's like, I've just done this 30-minute show where I've talked about, a moment in time and celebrating together. And then I don't want to suddenly be an infomercial, at the end. And by the way, I have Kenny Ahern.
You can take home a piece
blah,
of
blah,
the
blah. And I'm tired at the end of my show.
Yeah.
It's like, winded, and, it's for me, it's more important for me to, to greet people after show and shake hands, do high fives, take pictures with families. That's, what works well for me. Everyone figures out, how to do you. And, I've been doing this for over 40 years. And, I think I'm probably kind of finally figuring out how to do me.
After only 40 years, Kenny.
Yeah, after only 40 years.
Kudos to you, my pal. So you said you've been doing it for 40 years. That was actually my next question. How many shows a year do you do?
Well, last year, I did 250 shows, to give you an idea. So this year I'll be doing a little less, unless I have some holds happening in the fall and the winter that might come close. But on average, that's kind of what I do as far as show wise. But keep in mind, some of those are me with my stage that I'm at, like the Kansas State Fair, and I'm doing 3 30-minute shows a day, or maybe on Saturday I'm doing 5 30-minute shows. So it's those. But then also, I'm performing in theaters I'm doing school shows. You have to be a solo entertainer, solo entrepreneur. You have to be diversified. Back in the day, you could say, I'm only going to do corporate gigs, and you could be successful doing that. But now you really have to. So my main markets are theater, fairs and festivals where I tour with my own outdoor stage, and then also school shows. I have a program called The Power of Good Manners that I do for K-5 schools. A lot of times that will be what's called a cooperative outreach. So if I get booked for a theater show, then a school while I'm in town, either I'll book it or the theater will book it. And it's the whole idea is I'll go out there on a Thursday and do a show and for character development, and then also bring up about my show happening on Friday or Saturday night at the Performing Arts Center in town. Occasionally I'll get booked. I was just up in Hudson, Wisconsin, and a school brought me in for the last day of school to do that program. And I'll do that as well.
Do you find that kids are less polite now than they were when we were growing up?
A lot of people ask me that question. For me, again, I should just be doing a lot of knocking on wood this entire interview. For me, it's not as big of an issue. I'm 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. If I'm quiet and look at kids and hold my finger up to and gesture for them to be quiet, typically all the kids get quiet, and it's kind of fun because when I do that, I'll look out and I'll see all the educators sitting in their chairs around the kids, and they're all like looking at each other because of the fact that I was able to do this. All the kids are quiet. Again, I'm something new coming in and being focused on me. But I think for the most part, the character that I have when I perform, it's very kind, it's compassionate, and I think people can really see I'm really invested in their happiness, and I think that helps, for me as well. But I have no problem, that if a kid is acting up on stage, I have lots of different methods of doing it, but it's like, well, it's time for this kid to leave the stage because, whatever is going on for them in that moment, it's just not working for them. And I'll actually, I have ways of kindly having people leave the stage. And yeah.
How did you come up with this is going to be a weird question. How did you come to the conclusion of using your own name as your character's name?
Well, that comes from me touring with Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. You going in and touring with the circus, you used your name as your stage name, and it wasn't like you actually had a clown name. A lot of people assume that there are some people that perform, but those names were like their nicknames in life, and that's kind of what they used for their character. But for me, this is what I do for a living as well. So if I select another name that's not mine, unless it's so unique and so different that people are going to remember it, people have to know my name. So at the end of my show, if they're interested in booking me for another event, they need to know Kenny Ahern or Kenny or Ahern, or, they need to know that because, that's how, I get booked. A lot of word of mouth and a lot of people coming to my shows, that'll happen too. That's how I get booked. So that's kind of why, for me, when I perform, you're not seeing what you're seeing is me. It's just not a part of me that I use in my pedestrian lifestyle and how everyone, sees me. Like when you and I go out to Schmidt's or go someplace and have a beer, I am not the life of the party. I'm just the one that usually sits back. I'll pop in a couple little, cracks to be funny, but I'm just not that. I'm pretty much an introvert other than when I'm on stage. Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I am too. And it's funny because, the radio business, you're out there, but I hate talking in front of people. As a bartender, you're out there, but when I'm not working, I prefer to just kind of sit and listen because you learn a lot more from listening than you do when you're out there being, being the proverbial life of the party.
When Brenda and I, moved here to La Crosse after leaving Ringling and came home, we were actually being invited to parties because we really believed that they thought we were going to be the life of the party and we were going to be entertaining, that we were coming, and then they would, find out that, they're pretty, normal Midwest, normal kind people. They weren't the barrel of laughs that we expected them to be.
Right. Buster Keaton, is that somebody that you kind of portray when you're out? I mean, do you channel him?
Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Mr. Bean, and also a very big influence on me is Gene Kelly. And a lot of people think Buster Keaton, with me having the flat pork pie hat and the round glasses, that it comes from that. But it's actually I was inspired by Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain when he would do gotta dance, so that was a big part of I'd actually last year and I rarely do this, I made a comment to the Gene Kelly social media, which is run by his widow, his wife, and she got back to me, and that was just really cool. And I had reached out to him and just want to let her know how much Gene Kelly, his movement, and how the passion and everything showed off in his work, that it was a big influence on me, even though I'm not a dancer, I'm not doing TV or film, but it really was. And she just got back to me, and it was a very sweet interaction, and it wasn't just one. We went back and forth, and she actually went and looked at my website and commented about that. And so to me, that was very thrilling, that one of the big inspirations of my character, that someone, that his widow, his wife, got back to me. And that was really fun.
That's a really cool experience. So let's talk about experiences that you've had as an entertainer. What kind of things have you done that the normal person hasn't done because of the fact that you entertain for a living?
Well, I was called it was the opening act when I toured with Ringling Brothers, and for 4 of my 5 years, my job was to go out there and get the audience all hyped up before the show would start. I was the last 5 minutes before the lights would go down, the whistle would blow, and they would do "Welcome to the Greatest Show on Earth." So that was a really cool opportunity for me, where I would, myself on an arena floor in the New Orleans Superdome playing to like 24,000 people, and to know that I'm out there and getting laughs, and people are focused on me and what I'm doing. It's getting in the same type of zone that that anybody that would be from the Saints playing it, getting in that zone. I'm getting in that zone in the same place and focused. And that's pretty cool, and doing all those arena shows, and to have that experience. Done a lot of travel, and it's all been a part of what I do. And I think I'm fortunate. Travel is the best thing and the worst thing. So it's definitely a challenge. Now, I pretty much, stick to the continental United States as far as performing. But back in the day, I performed in Europe and Asia, in India, and, all over the United States, and had some great opportunities. Well, what a lot of people don't understand is that I'm going to go do shows in all these countries, and my shows, no matter where I perform in the world, my show is the same. I'll adjust culturally, yeah, for the culture. But for the most part, my show is, going, like, for instance, I'm going to be at the Mabel Tainter up in Menominee this week, and I'm doing a theater show. And what I do there for a theater show there is really the same show that I'm doing for a variety festival in Singapore. So I have that opportunity. It's my job. And so a lot of times, unless, I'm provided for to have extra time, I don't get to really see a lot of the country that I
Oh,
perform in.
that's unfortunate. That's
You
actually.
know,
I know. A few years ago, you posted when you were some in an Asian country. I don't know, remember which one, but you took a picture of the bathroom, and it was a toilet and a shower in the same picture. And to me,
that was a long time ago, Bob. That was
oh,
Japan.
oh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but I remember seeing that picture and thinking to myself, what in the hell? How does that work?
Well, you can multitask, you
Apparently
know.
so.
So and it's also the idea of having limited space.
Mm,
So they, having that limited space and just kind of putting it all together. So instead of the drain, in the tub, the drain's in the middle of the floor,
uh-huh.
So
So were you a class clown in school?
no. No, I went. I think a lot of people that knew me when I was younger are kind of surprised. But I was kind of I was involved in theater.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my late teens and had done a lot of theater, and that's what kind of led me to doing what I do now. And but other than that, I think people are surprised. Most people people have to meet me twice. A lot of people think I'm a professor at Viterbo or UWL, or something like that. They don't assume that that I do comedy for a living. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun. The people that meet me after I've done a show and then they meet me out, there's a little bit of head scratching going on. And it's just the same as if they meet me, not in my garb doing a show, and then they see me doing a show. I think people are more surprised that way, that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's the same guy that, I was just hanging out with, a couple of weeks ago and up on stage. It's a little confusing sometimes for people.
I'll bet it is. So I know that one time you called me up on stage at a Riverfest show in La Crosse,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had a couple of friends that are performers that have had me up on stage as well, and I don't raise my hand for it. I think you just picked me because you're like, okay, I'm going to get Bob on this one. Is it hard to get somebody that you know to do stuff like that? Because I know that.
Honestly, rarely do I pick someone that I know. And for me, the hardest time for me to perform is when I have friends or family in the
I'll
audience.
bet.
It's hard, for me because they know me in both worlds. And it's so I have to, not look at people that I know, that are good friends and family. It's like, why didn't you look at me? Why didn't you acknowledge me? And I said, because I had to,
You don't
you
want to
know.
break character. You don't want to break character. Is what it boils down to.
Yeah. So, but I've had it, where I've brought my daughter-in-law's father, doing the hat scaling that I do. And I've had, a few other people, that I brought up on stage that I knew. I have a student, that, back in the day during my downtime, I was a para with the school district. And so when, in the spring, when I'm not as busy, I would sub, and I had a student every year. I worked with him when he was 6, 7 years old, and now he's a young adult, and he still comes to my shows and wants to come up on stage, and it happens every year at Riverfest. And it's really fun to have that moment of knowing a kid so young. But also at Riverfest, I've been at Riverfest for 31 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm almost on my third generation, people coming to
Yeah.
the show and seeing me perform. So
Right. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about some of the. Because another friend of mine that had me up on stage was the hypnotist that got Howie Mandel to shake hands on America's Got Talent.
Mhm.
And I know that you and I have talked about this many years ago on the radio, that you got invited to be on a couple of those shows, right?
Mhm.
So how does some? I always thought that it was just somebody saying, you know what, I feel like I could do this. I go there and I apply, but that's not necessarily the case.
They hire producers that will, that are kind of like talent scouts, and they'll go see shows, they'll search the internet. And early on, 30 Seconds to Fame, America's Got Talent, that was the one that, that I've been contacted the most. But for me, I just always kind of sense that, the fact that, I don't speak when I perform and, what I do is pretty silly. I never felt comfortable that I was going to be treated right. I've had people that have been, on reality shows like that. And the audience, when you sign a contract that basically says that they own the film and control the situation that you're in, no lie, in perpetuity throughout the universe. That's in the contract that you sign before you actually are
Wow.
on that show. So that's basically, and this has happened because I've talked to friends that an act killed on stage and the audience was loving it. And then when they edited it and put it on, they edited out the audience and actually put in booing. So that set was an awesome set, but to create some drama and to fit into that reality mode, they changed what it
So
was.
it's not true reality then.
No. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have friends, I've had friends that have been in the semifinals, for AGT, and I've had other friends that have gone. And, a lot of people, have had success with that. But, for me, I'm very careful about my brand and what it is that I'm projecting, to an audience. I mean, I'm a family entertainer, clean family entertainment, and that's my heart and soul, of what I do. And to put a bad light on that, you do that and you get booze or you get the three X's that lives on the internet forever.
Yeah.
So no matter how it went. So for me, I didn't really feel that when I was being asked to do that they had my best interest. Even my friend who was in the semifinals, he had stuff set up to build for his act, and then you have to give them, what types of sets that you have, and then the producers on the show organize that to fit their theme on how the show is running. And they purposefully picked one of his not strong pieces to be on the show because they were setting him up to actually get, to get the three buzzers. But the best part was, since he was in the semifinals, they brought him back and they put him on stage and they said, who knows what's going to happen, but whatever you do at the end, just, be kind, and so we had these, it's called a crying rig. And so what you do is you have a post that gets over your head and goes right here at your eyes. And then you have a bulb with water in it and you squeeze it with your hand or with your armpit and it looks like you're crying and there's just giant water coming out. So he just decided, no, they weren't too kind to me. So he got out there and started making it like he was crying. And this water is just shooting out of. And this was the live show. This wasn't the edited show. And it was great because that was his moment, and that ended up going viral. Him doing it because it was a great shot of him. Poor semifinalist crying on stage, and then it would go to the clip of 6 feet of water shooting out of his eyes. So
I'm gonna have to look for that. So you mentioned your brand. How do we find more about Kenny Ahern?
KennyAhern.com or on social, Kenny Ahern Comedy. And, there's videos that I have on my website and then also on my social, that I do. That I went into all that kicking and fighting, doing social media when it first started. And I was like, when it all first started, I'm going, what's the point? How is this, helping, the cause? And so, I finally was brought in to know that, I have to post some stuff occasionally and do it. But, it does definitely help. And that was something that I had to learn. But if you go to KennyAhern.com or on Instagram or on Facebook, Kenny Ahern Comedy, and then you'll find all the stuff, the stuff that I do in my journey, to creating laughter for people all these years.
What am I missing? What should I be asking you?
Well, this would be specific to lacrosse. 35 years ago, we came to La Crosse because my wife Brenda is from La Crosse. And, our plan was to stay here for a year and then go to the big city, go to a big city and do that. And that was, 35 years ago. And I think one of the best choices that Brenda and I made was to stay here in La Crosse and to raise our family because of just what a beautiful community it is, a great place to raise a family. And we're very happy, to be here. I mean, I consider La Crosse my hometown.
Me
I
too,
was born.
actually.
Yeah, I was born in Boston. In my later early teens, I was outside of Washington D.C. But having been here, this is a beautiful, beautiful, loving and giving community. And the fact that Brenda and I decided to stay here and raise our kids and be here, I think it's one of the best decisions that we ever made. So wouldn't say you missed that, but I think it's important, that people know that, the Cooley region, the Driftless area, it's pretty lucky. And having not lived here, I think that, people that have maybe been here all their lives, maybe sometimes forget how special this is. Kind of like, familiarity breeds contempt. But I can be coming from, doing a tour in Taiwan, a month-long tour in Taiwan, when I'm flying into La Crosse and coming over the bluffs and seeing the rolling, Mississippi below me. It's just like, it's not that I'm just home. It's like, this is a really special place.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. We got bluffs, we've got the river, we've got a lot, and great people too. So how do you want to be known?
I think for people, I want them to know that I'm a funny guy. That's what I've always been on stage. I can be funny off stage, but really, what I did is I worked hard for 40 years to serve the audience, and in doing so, to try to create, some joy in people's lives that many times I don't know, but at the end of my show, we have a connection, and it's like we've become friends. And for 40 years, that's what I've worked really hard to do with every show. So, funny guy Kenny Ahern, he did his best to try to make people happy, and I think that's how I would want to be remembered from a performing aspect. I think that's would be important to me.
Thanks so much for listening to the BS with Bob podcast. Basically, it's just me pulling up the metaphorical bar stool and chatting with everyone from entertainers to educators to business owners to marketing gurus. People who've done cool things, survived weird stuff, and have a good story to tell. Please like, subscribe, and share the podcast.